Hey there guys, Peter here, back with another video for you. And today, again, we're going to take a look at some graphics cards. With the AMD's announcement of RX 470 coming out on August 4th, and RX 460 coming out on August 9th, I think it's about time to make a small roundup of all currently available RX 480 cards. I would like to make a small disclaimer in the beginning that this is not going to be the most informative video in the world. This is just going to be a small comparison, more of a guideline than an actual review of each of the models. If you'd like to see more, there are a plethora of websites that you can go and check out reviews of a specific model. Now with that out of the way, let's jump right in and start with the reference model. You can see the specifications on the screen right now. However, what's important is the clock speed of 1266 and the memory speed of 1750 or higher. However, when we check out the reviews, the memory clock speed is 2000 MHz. So this will be our baseline to compare to all other models. What you need to keep in mind is that this is the reference model. This is just the bare minimum the company consider viable for the chip and its memory to actually work. From that point forward, all other companies are able to do whatever they like with their designs. And this is what we're going to take a look at this time around. For example, looking at the cooler of the reference model, we can clearly see that the cooler is just a small piece of aluminum with nothing on it. There are no heat pipes, there is nothing on it. The memory chips and power delivery system are cooled by the black chunk of metal that the fan is attached to. Again, this is the bare minimum and the cooling of this thing is not adequate at all. From that point forward, all other RX 480 models is supposed to have way better cooling than this one. Let's start with a brand that still haven't released its 480 model yet. And this is Gigabyte. Looking at their website does not really give us a lot of information about the clock speed or the cooler or whatever, but we have some photos that shows us that the cooler is dual slot design with 2 fans. We can also see that the GPU will have 8-pin power connector, which means that the PCB itself, the card, will be completely redesigned. From what we can gather from the pictures, it will have 3 copper heat pipes directly touching the chip that will dissipate the heat throughout an array of aluminum fins using the 2 fans Gigabyte is providing. However, the cooler does not seem capable enough of dissipating a large amount of heat, and as we will see later, a similarly sized cooler does not do a good job at all. Moving on to another company that still hasn't released its RX 480 model, we're talking of course about the XFX. The thing about the XFX model is that we almost don't have any specific information about it. What we know from a press release is that it is going to have clock speed over 1300 MHz. So it's going to be overclocked. We also have some information about the cooler. A nice selling point on this specific model is the detachable fans, which are just pinch and release, just like NZXT Tempest 410 back in the day. You just squeeze the 2 clips and pull, and there you go. Looking at the cooler, however, this thing looks massive. See, if you compare it to the Gigabyte cooler, this thing is huge. And I mean big, this thing is massive. It has 4 copper heat pipes moving into a dual array of dense, and I mean really dense, aluminum fins. I'm expecting this thing to have a way better cooling performance and keep way lower temperatures than the Gigabyte model. On top of that, from the released pictures, we can see that the power delivery system is also cooled by the massive cooler itself. It has a direct contact with the cooler. I am not entirely sure how the memory modules are going to be cooled, and that brings me up directly into the next 480 models. My guess is it's going to be cooled the same way the MSI does this thing, meaning with a separate metal plate. Companies like MSI, ASUS, etc. that produces GPUs for both manufacturers like to use a similar designs for all of their models, meaning that the GTX 1060 recently released from MSI will have absolutely the same design as the RX 480 that still hasn't been released. And we can see that the GTX 1060 have its power delivery system and its memory modules cooled by just a simple metal plate, just like the reference RX 480. And I must say that does not really give good enough cooling. Looking at the cooler itself, the two fans and the dense fin array is really massive and will probably give the GPU itself, the chip, fairly decent cooling. We'll keep it at low temperatures. However, I am slightly more concerned about the VRM and the memory chips. Looking at the MSI website, we see they will have two models of the RX 480. One of them with core clock of 1316 MHz and 2025 memory clock, and the other one with 1292 MHz core clock and 2000 memory clock. So both versions will be overclocked. Speaking about overclock, ASUS's website surprisingly says that the core clock is 1266, meaning the GPU is not overclocked at all. However, when I look at the reviews said that the GPU is overclocked to 1310 MHz. And this is where we finally get into the big, bulky, beautiful coolers. Looking at this beautiful 5 heat pipe cooler with triple fan design, with power delivery system directly attached to the fin array, the big disappointment comes when you look under the cooler and you see a tiny little metal bar cooling the memory chips. Guys, I mean, really? Just this tiny little piece of metal? You can clearly see that it's not even covering the memory chips as it should be. They are semi-opened. This provides even less cooling than the MSI model. The reference model provides better cooling for the memory than the ASUS model. This comes as no surprise though, since we can see that the memory chips are not overclocked at all. The memory is still at its base clock of 2000 MHz. But what the hell, right? The cooling is not important. What's important is that we have an RGB LEDs, because we need to have RGB. Just like the Gigabyte model, RGB is more important than an adequate cooling, because, I don't know. Other interesting features that seem to be more important than adequate cooling are additional fan connectors on the GPU itself in order to hook up additional fans. For example, you can hook up a case fan to deliver extra air directly to the GPU. Or if you decide to do some crazy overclocking of that card, you have an overclock measuring points that are clearly labeled so you can measure your voltages and whatnot. I like how you can measure them without having to remove anything from the card, because there is a cutout on the back plate. However, the labeling of those points is hidden by the cooler. But what the hell, right? It's important that we have a single piece of metal that provides inadequate cooling for the memory chips, but you can overclock them, you know? Guys, ASUS, seriously? Now, with the disappointment out of the way, we are left with our two main competitors. First off, we're going to start with the Sapphire. The Sapphire Nitro is coming actually in two models. One of them is slightly overclocked to 1306 core clock, and the other one is overclocked to 1342. With both of them keeping the stock 2000 MHz memory clock. All of them basically are having the same design, so let's check it out. Now, Sapphire, as usual, have done some very nice, very interesting things. First off, they have the removable fans similar to the XFX model. However, their specific implementation seems to be a bit different. You need a screwdriver, you need to undo only one screw, and then the fan comes out. If I must be honest, I think I like the XFX implementation a little bit better. But if I need to be completely honest, I can see some issues with the XFX implementation as well. Those plastic clips and those non-stop running fans with this vibration could introduce some extra noise that we don't really like to hear. So I can see why Sapphire went with an actual screw instead of a clips. Another interesting point in favor of the Sapphire model is that their backplate is actually perforated, basically creating a less obstructive path for the air. And I don't know if the pictures will illustrate that well enough. The thing is that the holes that they have given the air to escape are away from the actual cooler, meaning that the effect is completely negated by the fact that this is not a warm air that is escaping through those holes. They just have made a corridor for the air right next to the cooler. The cooler is actually away from that specific airflow point. Another interesting negative point is just the same point I have towards the Gigabyte cooler. It's just way too small. I mean, look at it. Sapphire, do you remember the Vapor X cooler or the Tri-X cooler? You shouldn't have forgotten those, you made them. Then if you think those are too big, you can still use the Toxic cooler, but no, you decided to give me 10 aluminum fans that dissipate the heat from 3 heat pipes. The positive from the entire story is that all GPU, memory modules, and the power delivery system are all cooled by this cooler. They have a direct touch to the cooler. It's not like the ASUS or the MSI, or it's not like them having a separate metal plate just for those things. The cooling of those components is actually active, connected to the aluminum fin array. Now, to this card's credit, first off, it looks sleek and understated compared to the chunky ASUS card that is full of sharp angles and whatnot. Second off, it has RGB, but the RGB can be turned off and it's just the Sapphire logo with different mods. And third, it has the power connector on the side. God damn it, finally! Somebody put the power connector on the side so the cabling can be way better looking when put inside the actual case. Thank you, Sapphire. The only one left is the PowerColor Devil card. Now this thing has overclock up to 1330 MHz without touching the memory clock. The cooler is absolutely enormous, reaching 310mm, having triple fan design with the fan blades that I haven't seen before, or at least I don't think I have seen before. They're 80mm fans, but they have a very interesting, innovative fan design that is set to increase the airflow with 20% compared to the standard fan blade design. The massive cooler is set to have two 8mm and two 6mm heat pipes, And as we can see, have a dense array of aluminum fins. It has a direct contact with the memory modules and the power delivery. It is not like the ASUS or MSI where there is a separate plate. The massive cooler is actually cooling all the components, and we'll see that later on in the Roundup. I would like to note two negative points about the Devil cooler. First off is the single piece of PCB that you can see throughout the holes of the cooler. This is just the fan hub for the cooler fans. My issue with it is that it's a green PCB when the GPU is a black PCB. And I mean, okay, it's not a big deal, but you could have easily either hidden it better or just made it black, so even though it's visible, it's not going to detract much from the overall vision of the product. However, keeping in mind that after the installation of the GPU, this fan hub will be near the motherboard, and you will probably never see it in a standard PC case layout. This is not the big deal. The big deal, however, is the Devil logo on the visible side of the card. Usually when you install a GPU in a standard case layout, the GPU have its fans facing down. And you can see on the picture that if we have the fans facing down, the Red Devil logo on the cooler will be upside down. Why? Well, I don't know. Is it just a fuck up on the design side? I don't know, but this is a kind of thing that will drive me crazy. So this is my big negative about this particular cooler design. Before we go any further, I would like to briefly mention the ASUS RX 480 Ice-Q model that looks honestly atrocious. It promises 0 decibel fans, but we all know how this thing goes. The GPU fans will not spin until a certain thermal threshold, usually 60 degrees Celsius. And after that it will start ramping up. It will have a fairly dense aluminum fin array with, as far as I can see, either 4 or 5 heat pipes. So with that out of the way, let's jump to the performance tables. Computerbase.de has been kind enough to review all 4 models that are currently out on the market and place them in that convenient graph, where we can see that the fastest model of all RX 480s is the Sapphire Nitro Plus. This is not supposed to be any surprise whatsoever, keeping in mind that this specific model also has the highest factory overclock out of the box. It is followed very closely by the ASUS Strix, followed really closely by the PowerColor Devil model. Somewhere way down below 5-6% below that is the reference RX 480 model. So okay, we have our performance king among those 4 models. It's the Sapphire Nitro. However, I would like to bring your attention to the noise comparison. Idling on the desktop, all GPUs are fairly equal, keeping in mind Computerbase is testing inside a Define R5 case, and the noisy reference cooler is taking the lead, but that is no surprise whatsoever. Moving to the gaming tests, however, we see how much noise the Sapphire is actually producing. It is way noisier than any of its competitors. This shouldn't come as a surprise either, as I said in my PC case fan speed video. More fans on lower speed, guys. More fans on lower speed. And here is another proof of that. The Sapphire has just 2 fans, they need to spin faster, therefore produce more noise in order to keep the GPU cooler. You can see that the PowerColor is indeed extremely quiet. However, the noise is not important unless it translates well enough into lower thermals. So we need to look at the thermal graph, and looking at the Windows desktop thermals, those temperatures are fairly similar. However, moving towards gaming, we can see that the PowerColor and the ASUS are pulling almost 10 degrees ahead of the Sapphire models. Even on the quiet mode, the Sapphire cards are reaching 77, while the PowerColor on its quiet mode is keeping 68, which is quite a high difference. I'm surprised, however, that the PowerColor is keeping so high temperatures when it comes to full balls to the wall performance. But I guess that comes down to the fact that the fans are really quiet and slow spinning. No wonder we have that silent operation. They are not helping a lot with the cooling, but still they keep the same temperature with way quiet operation. So here it is, guys, a roundup of all available RX 480 models with some information about the still unreleased models of the same card. Basically my point is, if I personally have to buy one of those GPUs right now, I would probably go for the PowerColor one. Not because of the extreme performance, but because of the extreme silence. Keeping in mind that I can tweak the fan curve a little bit and add some extra cooling and still keeping it quieter than the competition, I think the PowerColor is completely worth it. Also, I like big GPUs inside my system. So yeah, that's all from me for today, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this little video of mine. If you did, you can hit the like button down below. If you did not, well, the dislike button is right next to it. Check some of my other videos right here. If you like them as well, you can subscribe to my channel for more videos. I'll see you in the next one, and I hope you have a fantastic day.